Hello, dear warrior. They begged the skies, but the skies were tired. You crossed that final line, didn't you? Not with rage, not with pride, but with a smile that knew no return. You weren't born to obey. You were built to burn their rules. Silently. Now their gods sit silent, like old statues in forgotten temples. They don't answer anymore. Not to them, not to you, not to anyone, because you made the noise they feared most. Truth wrapped in madness. You didn't ask for justice. You became it. You didn't kneel. You laughed. And that laugh, it echoed through every system they worshipped. You're not the villain of their story. You're the glitch in their destiny. They wanted a follower, but you gave them a funeral. One act, one grin, one final step, past the line, and now the prayers don't work. The lights don't blink. The gods are offline, and the monster they warned them about. Yeah, you're rewriting the scriptures with a bloody smile. They trained you to be silent, to walk straight, to color within their dead little lines. But you chose the chaos between them. You walked sideways, laughing, bleeding, whispering the truth they buried deep. They called it rebellion. You called it waking up. And now, every rule book smells like smoke, because that fire inside you, it doesn't ask for permission. It devours permission. They brought gods into this war, but forgot. Even gods kneel when the system fails. And you, my friend, you didn't break the system. You humiliated it. Every camera blinked. Every speaker glitched, because your whisper, your smile was louder than 1,000 preachers. They still pray, they still cry, but their gods are gone. And you're just getting started. You are not their nightmare. You are the silence after it. The pause, right before everything explodes. They thought the final line was a wall, but you saw it for what it really was. A curtain. And you ripped it open with a grin painted in scars. Now they see the truth. It was never heaven behind that curtain. It was a cage dressed in gold. Rules? They were chains. Tradition? Just another leash. And belief? Oh, belief was their sharpest weapon, but not for you. You turned belief inside out. You didn't ask for freedom. You stole it. And when you laughed, that wild, holy laugh, the ground beneath their temples cracked. You weren't raised by gods. You were forged by silence, by betrayal, by pain. And now that pain, it dances with you. Every step forward leaves a footprint of fire. Every word you speak, it doesn't echo. It burns itself into their memory. You are no longer fighting their system. You are replacing it, brick by broken brick, whisper by whisper. Now they kneel, not out of faith, but fear. Their lips move in prayers, but no one's listening anymore. You silenced the sky. You made their gods ghost towns. Abandoned, rusted, irrelevant. They scream blasphemy, but all you did was tell the truth louder than they could lie. You didn't just break their rules. You exposed them, revealed the puppeteers behind the sacred curtain. Now even the worshippers feel hollow. Because you touched the untouchable. You whispered to the forbidden, and it whispered back, Now they panic, not because you're evil, but because you're free. You made your pain your prophecy. You carved chaos into your crown, and now they scramble, trying to rebuild a kingdom that you already turned to ash. They hope their gods answer, but you already tore down the line. You are the answer, the curse, the code they can't decode. They had temples built on fear, and you walked in with silence sharper than thunder, not to pray, but to smile. A smile that cracked their foundations. Because when you crossed that final line, you didn't just step into rebellion, you became it. They carved lines in the sand, but you came with tides and drowned every limit with laughter. Their rules were cages, you brought keys and matches. They called it madness. You called it freedom. The gods stopped answering, not because they feared you, but because you replaced them. Your story echoed louder than their scriptures. They write history, but you burn it and leave new graffiti. Chaos was here. Order was a joke. And in that joke, they saw the truth. You crossed the line. And now they pray not to be rewritten, but this pen. It bleeds ink soaked in vengeance. The final line wasn't a boundary, it was a dare. And you don't step in like a guest. You arrive like a storm in a throne room. Their guards flinched, their leaders blinked, but you grinned. No weapons, no army, just a whisper louder than war. They spoke of power like it came from titles. But you showed them real power, speaks from scars. You didn't break rules. You shattered them into confetti. You didn't knock. You exploded the door, lit a cigar in the ashes, and dared the silence to challenge you. They built their gods from control. But your madness is a language those gods never understood. They pray in fear. You laugh in fire, because when you crossed that line, you didn't enter their world. You infected it. And now they're gods, busy hiding behind curtains, while you turn every sermon into a stand-up tragedy. When society draws blood, you don't heal. You reload. They told you pain builds character. So you built a kingdom. Every brick, a broken promise. Every banner, a scream they ignored. They dressed their guilt in suits and buried their shadows beneath politeness. But you wear your madness like war paint, and you don't knock twice. Their justice? A game of masks and mirrors. Your vengeance? A sermon written in chaos. They gave you rules. You turned them into riddles. They built prisons. You made blueprints out of the bars. Because this world doesn't need another quiet soldier. It needs a loud question mark. One they can't silence. One that laughs when gods hide and burns the silence they worship. You crossed the final line, not to escape, but to unmake everything they thought was holy. They wanted a puppet. You gave them a paradox. They handed you their script. You rewrote it in red ink and laughter. They said, bow to order. You smiled and whispered, chaos remembers everything. Their gods sit on golden silence, but you sit on memories. Explosive, broken, radioactive. You are not here to fit in. You're here to haunt the system. You think you forgot their shadows. No, you archived them in scars, in sleepless nights, In every moment they laughed while you drowned. Now, you swim in their shame. You breathe in their betrayal and spit it back as poetry. You are the answer to their forgotten victims. You are what happens when whispers learn how to scream. Their temples will crack, not from earthquakes, but from the truth you carved in every echo. You're not their enemy, you're their mirror, wearing a grin they can't erase. They baptized you in fire, and now they pray for rain. But tell them this flame learned to dance. You didn't survive the burn, you became it. Their rules melted, their morals turned to smoke, and you walked out, glowing with vengeance. They said you'll break. You whispered no, you'll bend the world instead. You saw the saints fall, not from sin, but from silence. And you broke that silence with a scream stitched from every betrayal. They can't stop you now. They only fueled you. Every time they ignored the truth, it sharpened your tongue. Every slap turned into a sentence. Every wound became a word. Now you speak fluently in scars. Their gods don't answer because you unplugged their illusion. They pray to silence. You preach with fire. And this time, the fire talks back. So let them fear what you've become, because you're not just the spark anymore. You're the matchbox they forgot to lock. They thought they erased you, but you turned the ashes into ink and rewrote the prophecy. They built a cage from commandments, but you used every bar as a stepping stone. They thought silence was punishment. You made it your sharpening room. Every quiet moment, every ignored scream was a seed. Now watch you bloom into their worst sermon. You don't need a pulpit. You don't need their approval. Your altar is made from the bones of you can't. Your voice, a whisper that shatters stained glass. They had their chance. Now you deliver the message, and it bleeds truth. Unholy, uncomfortable, but undeniable. They burned books to stop you, so you became a library of pain. And when they see you speak, they'll realize the gods stopped answering because you became the echo, not to be worshipped, but to remind them you can silence a man, but you can't mute a reckoning. When you knocked, heaven went quiet, so you kicked in the door. No choir sang, no light beamed, just a throne, empty, and you laughed. Not out of joy, but out of understanding. They built this illusion, layer by layer. Gold over rot, hope over control. You saw it all. The priests with poison pens, the angels with broken wings, the prayers that echoed back with receipts instead of answers. You weren't meant to survive this silence. But silence is your gospel now. You don't beg gods, you build storms. Your faith isn't in miracles, it's in scars. They prove you endured what was designed to erase you. Now you speak, and even their statues tremble, because truth doesn't need volume, it needs venom, and yours drips with prophecy, not of salvation, but of reckoning. And when you're done, even the silent stars will whisper your name in fear. They built temples to forget. You broke them to remember, not for vengeance, but for clarity. Every brick they stacked was a lie dipped in gold. Every idol a mask hiding trembling cowards. You see, you never feared their gods. You feared the silence that followed when you questioned them. Because silence, it speaks louder than thunder when you're bleeding for truth. So you carved questions into stone, lit flames beneath their sacred scrolls, not to desecrate, but to liberate. They called you mad, but madness was the only language they hadn't censored yet. And in that chaos, you found poetry, a rhythm not of chants but of chains breaking, of blindfolds burning, of minds waking. They tried to bury you in silence, but you whispered back, and their altars cracked. Now their myths tremble when you speak, because you don't preach, you unmask. They offered you crowns, but you melted them into knives, because you don't sit on thrones built by obedience. You carve paths through fear. They called it royalty. You called it a leash, a trap dressed in velvet, gold-plated submission. So you smiled and turned their reward into resistance. Each gem became a wound you remembered, each piece of gold a lie you sharpened, until you had blades made of their promises, and you didn't throw them. No, you handed them back edge first, one by one. Their eyes begged for mercy, but you don't barter with kings. You don't kneel for symbols. You break them, because in this game only one truth remains. The throne is a stage, and you are the fire behind the curtain, the whisper in the war room, the laugh echoing after the kingdom falls. They crowned you villain, but you were the cure. You didn't break the rules. You buried them, 6 feet under, next to the gods who made them. They whispered commandments from thrones, but you were never made of silence. You were thunder, coiled beneath grins and red smiles. Their laws tried to bind you, but chains rust when you stop fearing them. So you laughed at their warnings, at their sacred lines drawn in sand, thinking storms don't step over chalk. But you are the storm, the rain they thought they could outrun, the fire that licks heaven's gate while angels look away. They wanted obedience. You gave them echoes. They wanted silence. You gave them chaos. And now, their gods don't answer, because you became the question they never dared to ask. Not in temples, not in courts, not in dreams. So remember, you didn't just cross the line. You erased it with a smile. Their gods watched you burn their commandments into laughter. Holy scrolls turned to smoke, one grin at a time. The heavens didn't crack, they trembled, because you were the one who turned their sacred hymns into punchlines. You mocked their golden rules with a whisper, and the whisper echoed like a scream. They built temples on fear, altars on obedience, but you showed them a smile sharper than their blades can split a kingdom in two. No thunder, no army, just you, dancing through their divinity like it was a joke written in bad ink. Their prophets stayed quiet, their angels hid their faces, even the stars refused to blink. Because what do you do when the one who isn't afraid of hell starts lighting matches inside your heaven? You don't pray. You run. And still you smile, because they gave you silence, and you turned it into legend. You stood at the altar. They built from trembling bones and forgotten names. They whispered, "This is sacred." You whispered back, "Not anymore." Your smile didn't seek revenge. It delivered reality. They prayed for mercy. You gave them mirrors, showed them the rot behind their righteous masks. And when the final bell tolled, they didn't hear judgment. They heard laughter, because you didn't break their rules. You made their rules beg you to break them. Every step you took cracked their heavens. Every word you spoke choked their gods. And still, you never raised a blade. You only raised your voice, calm, cold, and burning with the truth no one dared to say. You didn't crush their faith. You exposed it and watched it crumble under the weight of a whisper they couldn't silence. Now they wander, lost in the smoke of their own illusions, while you carve legends with a grin dipped in eternity. They built kingdoms with chains, golden, shining, silent chains. But you walked in barefoot with dust on your coat and thunder in your voice. You didn't roar, you whispered, and they froze. Because your silence wasn't quiet. It was louder than their armies, sharper than their swords. They stood at the edge of their power, shaking, as you stepped off the edge like it was a stage. You didn't ask for permission. You replaced permission. They called you mad. You smiled. Because madness is just truth wrapped in a laugh they can't explain. You turned their prophets into question marks. You turned their rules into riddles they fear to solve. And when you lit their sacred laws on fire, you didn't scream. You just watched as flames danced like poetry written by shadows. And now, every corner of their kingdom echoes with one sound. Your footsteps, walking away, while everything they worship turns to ash. They prayed to false thrones, built temples of illusion. But you stared into the storm and whispered welcome, because you don't break under pressure. You bend it to your will. Their guardians stood tall, wrapped in rituals and silence, but you stepped between them, carrying only one weapon, truth, sharpened like a grin. You don't wear crowns, you melt them. You don't seek mercy. You offer choices, either burn with your lies or walk through your fire and be reborn. They thought their gods would shield them, but the gods they looked away, because even divinity knows, when a whisper walks with conviction, thunder bows. You became their reckoning, not through violence, but vision. You whispered